In 2024, the ladder was pulled up. First-time homebuyers dropped to 24% of the market, a historic low. A generation is being told they will own nothing. But don't mistake this for a market cycle. This is an acquisition strategy. While you were looking at mortgage rates, institutional capital began capturing the inventory. This is a pattern that has played out twice before in history. In ancient Rome, it signaled the end of the Republic. In England, it created a permanent working class. History suggests we are entering the third iteration. The middle class is being enclosed. Most people think this is a temporary crisis. I'm going to show you why it's a permanent shift. Imagine you are a young couple in Atlanta. You have the down payment. You have the pre-approval letter. You find the perfect starter home in a decent zip code. It's listed on Friday. You tour it Saturday morning. You draft a full price offer by Saturday lunch. By Saturday dinner, you get the call. You didn't just lose, you were erased. An all-cash buyer took it. No inspection, no financing contingency. They closed in 5 days. You think you lost to another family? You didn't. You lost to an algorithm. In some Atlanta zip codes, 1 out of every 8 homes is now owned by a corporate landlord. You aren't competing with a neighbor. You're fighting Invitation Homes, a company that owns around 85,000 houses. You're fighting Progress Residential, which, at its peak, used algorithmic targeting to acquire up to 2,000 homes a month. You're fighting Blackstone, which added another 62,000 homes by acquiring Tricon Residential. While you were waiting 60 days for bank approval, they were buying entire neighborhoods with the speed of high-frequency traders. Here's what makes this different from normal market competition. In 2011, institutional investors owned virtually no single-family homes. 0. Today, they control over 450,000. In Atlanta, large investors control an estimated 25% of all single-family rentals. In Jacksonville, 21%. Charlotte, 18%. Tampa, 15%. Research suggests these institutional buyers pay roughly 10% less than families for similar properties. Bulk purchasing power, negotiating leverage, capital reserves that let them wait out any market. A family with a mortgage can't compete with that. They were never meant to. This isn't a housing market. It is a conquest. And we have seen this specific type of conquest before. 2,000 years ago, the Roman Republic faced the exact same crisis. The Roman middle class was the citizen farmer. These were men who owned their own land, voted in assemblies, and served in the legions. Land ownership wasn't just wealth in Rome. It was citizenship. It was identity. It was the foundation of Roman power. But here's where the trap begins. While these farmers were away fighting Rome's wars, spending years, sometimes decades in Spain or Africa or Greece, their farms back home fell into debt. Crops failed. Families struggled. And when the soldiers finally returned, they found wealthy patricians waiting with cash offers. Just like the hedge funds in Atlanta, the Roman elite used their capital advantage to buy up distressed small farms and merge them into massive estates called Latifundia. And they worked those estates with slaves captured in the same wars that had ruined the farmers. The math was brutal. A citizen farmer couldn't compete with slave-powered industrial agriculture. One by one, they sold. One by one, they became tenants on land they used to own. One by one, they flooded into Rome, homeless, landless, dependent on grain handouts to survive. By the time of Emperor Nero, according to Pliny the Elder, just 6 owners possessed half the farmland in the entire province of Africa. 6 men, half a province. Pliny looked at this consolidation and wrote 3 words that explain your Zillow feed perfectly. Latifundia, perdidere, Italiam. The great estates have ruined Italy. Today, the latifundia has a ticker symbol. Once they control the land, the goal changes. They don't want to sell you a home, they want to enclose you. In 2012, Invitation Homes was founded to buy foreclosures. Blackstone spent roughly $10 billion acquiring tens of thousands of homes. The majority purchased directly from foreclosure pipelines at fire sale prices. The government didn't stop them. According to NPR, the government provided a $1 billion loan guarantee to encourage purchases. By 2017, they controlled enough inventory to start squeezing. According to an FTC investigation, CEO Dallas Tanner sent an internal email urging executives to juice this hog by adding mandatory fees, smart home fees, pet rent fees, air filter fees. Between 2021 and 2023, the company charged consumers tens of millions of dollars in these mandatory fees on top of their monthly rent. They weren't providing a service, they were building a fence. The FTC also found that Invitation Homes returned only about 39% of security deposits, compared to a national average of 64%. They charged renters for normal wear and tear, for damages that existed before the tenants moved in, for renovations the company decided to make. This is extraction by design, and it's the second historical warning we missed. In 16th century England, wealthy landowners realized they could make more money raising sheep for wool than renting land to peasants, so they passed Enclosure Acts They literally fenced off the common lands that villagers had used for centuries to graze cattle and survive. Between 1604 and 1914, Parliament passed over 5,200 of these acts, privatizing roughly 6.8 million acres, 1/5 of England's total land enclosed. And who controlled Parliament? Landowners. Thomas More saw this happening as early as 1516 and wrote that the sheep had become so wild that they eat up and swallow down the very men themselves. The sheep were the profit engine. The peasants were just in the way. Today, the sheep is the rental yield, and you are the peasant they are squeezing to feed it. Invitation Homes settled that FTC case for $48 million without admitting wrongdoing. But that email, "Juice this hog," reveals the mindset. It is the modern version of Enclosure. Same pattern, same playbook, different century. The British peasants tried to fight back. Groups called the Diggers tore down the fences and filled in the ditches. Their manifesto declared that the earth was hedged into enclosures by the teachers and rulers, and the others were made servants and slaves. The historians John and Barbara Hammond later delivered the verdict on what enclosure really meant. Before enclosure, the cottager was a laborer with land. After enclosure was a laborer without land. Before, independence. After, dependence. That's the entire pattern in one sentence. The Roman farmers tried to fight back too. A tribune named Tiberius Gracchus proposed a law to break up the Latifundia and give the land back to the citizens. The Senate's response? They killed him. He died in a riot along with hundreds of his supporters. When his brother Gaius tried to pass the same law a decade later, they killed him too. Thousands of his supporters were executed. Why? Because the Senate was the landlord class. The people passing the laws were the ones profiting from the consolidation. Reform wasn't just difficult, it was structurally impossible. Does that sound familiar? In the last few years, Congress has introduced the Stop Wall Street Landlords Act, the End Hedge Fund Control of American Homes Act, and the Stop Predatory Investing Act. All of them stalled. Meanwhile, the government-sponsored enterprise Fannie Mae guaranteed a $1 billion loan for Invitation Homes in 2017. The first time in history a GSE had ever backed an institutional residential landlord. Your tax dollars helped back the loan that bought the house you couldn't afford. The pattern is identical. Crisis creates distressed sellers. 2008 foreclosures, the Punic Wars. Capital swoops in, Blackstone, the patricians. Legal systems protect the new owners, Congress, the Senate. Reform gets blocked by the people who benefit. Every time. A permanent renter class is born. In England, the enclosure movement created a permanent working class that had nothing to sell but their labor. They fled to cities and became factory workers for the Industrial Revolution, a class structure that still exists today. In Rome, the destruction of the citizen farmer created a mob dependent on grain handouts. Within a generation, Rome saw the social wars, 3 massive slave revolts, and the complete collapse of the Republic. We are entering the third iteration. First-time homebuyers have dropped to 24%, historic low. The average age of a first-time buyer has hit 38, historic high. The median homeowner holds roughly $255,000 in wealth. The median renter holds about $6,300. That's a 40-to-1 gap. A generation paying rent that builds nothing. MetLife investment management projects that by 2030, institutional investors could control 40% of all single-family rentals. That's roughly 7.6 million homes. That is 5 years away. The ladder isn't just being pulled up, it is being burned. Representative Ro Khanna said, "Americans aren't serfs. We didn't fight a revolution just to pay rent to Wall Street." He is right about the history, but he is wrong about the present. Unless you understand the pattern, you are already a serf. You just have an iPhone and a lease agreement. The pattern says what's coming next. In Rome, it was permanent dependency, then collapse. In England, it was the cementing of a two-class society, owners and workers, that lasted centuries. The trajectory here is already visible. 40% institutional ownership by 2030. A generation that may never build equity. Children who inherit rental payments instead of property. The wealth gap widening until ownership becomes inheritance, not achievement. But here's the difference between the people who got destroyed by this pattern and the people who didn't. The Romans who saw the Latifundia spreading had time to act. Most didn't believe it would reach them. The English cottagers who watched the enclosures coming had time to prepare. Most couldn't imagine losing what they'd always had. Recognition is the first step. You just took it. The question isn't whether it's happening. The question is whether you see it in time to position yourself on the right side of the fence. If this showed you the pattern they don't teach, hit subscribe, because the history they don't teach is the history that protects you. Position accordingly.